I combed through over 900 deck building titles on Steam looking for true hidden gems. Have you guys heard of Inscription? Really, I'd be shocked if you've heard of most of these, let alone played all of them. For this video, my hidden gem cutoff was fewer than 50 reviews, which would indicate the game sold around 1,000 copies, most of which on this list would have sold substantially less. In my hunt, I found about 20 titles that I thought looked fresh and interesting, playing them all, then narrowing it down to this final list of 10 hidden gem deck builders. I'm gonna round out this intro with a few Steam stats on deck builders, but have included timestamps if you just want to jump straight into the actual games. I was introduced to deck builders about 5 years ago, the way I'm sure millions of indie fans were, through Slay the Spire. There were board games and even a few computer games that came before, but Megacrit largely defined the new standards for the genre. Deck builders are most commonly roguelikes, enough so that Steam gives roguelike deck builder its own subgenre tag, which feels a little redundant to me when the other two tags are available. While many of the games on Steam have directly copied Slay the Spire, recent titles like Wild Frost, Backpack Battles, and Balatro have showcased the variety possible within the genre, with their successes proving this genre is far from oversaturated. There are currently 927 games on Steam that use the deck building tag, and only 264 that use the roguelike deck builder tag, almost entirely nested within that first list. Compare that to the more than 3,500 that use roguelike. 2024 is only a few months in, and we've already seen nearly 100 deck builder releases, meaning we're averaging more than one new deck builder per day. So the genre's popularity is definitely growing, and I expect these recent successes to inspire a whole new wave of both clones and entirely new spins on these concepts. But for this video, we're focusing on gems that have slipped through the cracks. Working through these in no particular order, Novus Orbis. While I promise this isn't a theme through the video, I am starting with the game on the list that likely has the most in common with Slay the Spire. You draft cards, acquire relics, complete events, and fight your way through monsters towards an end boss across multiple acts. Very familiar, but it distinguishes itself in several key areas. The most prominent change is how you play and manage your cards. There is a combo meter that enhances your cards if played in sequence based on their individual combo values. Each successful card played in sequence raises that combo value. Playing out of sequence will drop you back down to 0, while achieving a full 4 combo unlocks the potential of all the cards in your hand, building a synergistic deck further enhanced by blessings, and you can achieve some seriously broken runs. Turn order also works differently than in Slay the Spire. Rather than simply alternating player-enemy-player the way you would expect, enemies instead have a countdown timer. This ticks down by 1 with each card played, and by 2 when your turn ends. So be sure to strategically space out your actions and don't get caught with your guard down. There's also no overworld map for you to navigate. Instead, your advancement is presented through a series of binary options, often with something interactable present between them. These offer a variety of different ways to alter your deck and add new blessings, encouraging you to push against those systems to experiment with new item and card combinations and potentially discover a few new secrets. Novus Orbis aims to shake up your run as often as possible to keep the game feeling fresh even after you've played it 100 times. Don't get too attached to any specific combo because the odds that you replicate it every time are pretty slim. Yes, I did intentionally delay disclosing this, but Two Left Thumbs is publishing this game. It's the only game on the list that isn't actually released yet. I just wanted it to stand on its own merit, presenting it exactly how I intend to roll out the other games on this list, hopefully giving you the opportunity to decide whether you liked the sound of it or not prior to this information. I am directly supporting this game's solo developer, but he had already put in all the effort to setting up a Kickstarter campaign, so we decided, let's also run that at the same time, lower the goal slightly, and see if we can't take this game to the next level through some direct crowdfunding. There is a massive demo that you can play for free. It already gives access to 2 playable classes, which should offer you dozens of hours of replayability if you really push the limits. And if you enjoy that, please add it to your wish list. Go check out that Kickstarter campaign. There's a few weeks left there. And tell us what you think. Feedback is always welcome. WizardChess. Yes, this one is also published by 2 Left Thumbs. I'm not gonna bury the lead on that. I promise this is the last game on the list that I have any involvement with. This is a tactical roguelike that takes the grid-based movement and alternating piece-by-piece turn order of chess, blending that together with deck builders. This game is all about positioning, as you cannot simply take pieces or wearing down their health, instead needing to overwhelm their defense with a single cumulative attack. Upgrade your units with new stats, perks, and elements to greatly modify their strengths and usefulness, with most units also having a specialized skill that opens up a range of strategies that are only limited by your own creativity. But do watch out, because enemy units also have strange powers of their own that you'll need to counter and mitigate. I love this genre so much, that's why I made this video, and it's only fitting that I would seek out a few choice deck building titles to support. WizardChess felt really original, and does still fit the criteria I set for this video. I discovered it back in 2022 while it was in early access. We made that announcement alongside version 0.5 when the game was only sitting at about 2 reviews on Steam. It slowly found a larger audience, currently sitting at 33 reviews with a 90% positive rating, and it's been updated all the way to version 0.9. The game features 3 different biomes that each play out differently with a rising overall difficulty. You work your way through each, navigating this grid of structures, choosing which you want to do next, carving a path towards the boss. Each biome offers its own quirks. The mountains are quite standard. The maps are open and you have lots of shops and treasure rooms to visit and beef up your pieces. The desert maps are cut into straight lines, forcing new strategies. You can also earn new treasures in the special maze rooms. And in the Fey biome, all hell breaks loose. You'll have these specialized trade offers, your build is constantly being shaken up, and you can even gain access to what were once enemy-only pieces for other fun surprises. Each biome has its own units, challenges, and of course, final bosses. The bosses themselves will scale up in difficulty, giving you differing starting parties for additional challenges, and changing up the mechanics of that final battle after each success until you work your way up to the max rank. Most of the intended content is already in the game, and at full price, it's only $10. Ranking all 3 bosses up to A difficulty is probably going to take a couple dozen hours. We intend to raise the price of the game for version 1.0, so this is likely the cheapest the game will be for the foreseeable future. It is a great time to get on board. I really believe in these 2 titles and the small development teams behind them. It means the world to me to be in a position to directly support them, and I hope you all are drawn to them for the very same reasons I was. I promise I have 0 involvement whatsoever with the remaining 8 games on this list. So let's change gears and look outwards to supporting other indie games out there. Magic of Autumn. How about a non-roguelike deck builder to shake things up? Magic of Autumn is a deck-building puzzle game. It's a novel idea and is available for dirt cheap. It offers a concise but rewarding 5 to 6 hours of gameplay. There is no procedural generation here. The island is preset, and effectively everything on that island has the potential to become a card. You must interact with it through a default conjure skill that grants you access. Some examples of these cards include a broken boat, maple tree, and torch. But the deeper you get in the game, the more fantastical those card options become. You know, alongside examples like a bunch of blowing leaves. There are 56 unique cards to discover with the ability to craft a deck up to 20. So you'll have to experiment, not always making use of everything you've found. The combat itself has been heavily simplified compared to most deck builders. Both you and your opponent have health and warmth. You must generate warmth to play most cards. Each turn, you can draw a card, create warmth, or move your hand back to your deck. You may have one idle class card in play at a time. which carries its own attack and defense. You and your opponent's idols will attack each other, and if no idol is in play, attack is applied directly to health instead. These idols often carry special effects when either played or destroyed. First to 0 health loses. As simple as that. And the penalty for failure is simply to try again, giving you the option to explore other areas and acquire new cards first before going back into that battle. I did find on occasion that the first cards you draw can determine if you win or not, as generating warmth early on is crucial. If you get stuck without any warmth, you're probably gonna lose. But each encounter plays out quite differently and requires some trial and error to learn an effective response to each new deck. It's all so simplistic, but I think that's to its credit, as it kept me on my toes thinking through new strategies throughout. And there is a story that plays out in the occasional cutscene, so there's a little bit more at play here than just these minimalist combats. Just enough to keep things interesting. It's short, beautiful, and with a nice challenge and an impossible to ignore price tag. This game has been out for a while, and the dev dropped a new performance update for the game days after I played it. I'd say that sort of quality and dedication is easily worth a few dollars. Stolen Crown. This one came out about a year and a half ago, is only $10, and has a 100% positive rating after 14 reviews. Not a huge sample size, but I think it's well earned. There are 3 available classes with 3 main modes to play around in. Draft is the most standard, with your run starting with a choice of ability cards, which you always have in your hand. However, they still have resource costs and cooldowns that are unique to abilities. And rather than having a standardized starting deck, you also get to draft your 5 starting cards, which I really enjoyed. Venture forth from your camp and choose from selections like combat, encounters, merchants, mini-games, dungeons, and more. Combat is the most common, playing out in isometric hex-based environments. You have limited movement and resources to play cards each turn, tiptoeing around enemies, trading damage, and strategically choosing your battles. While I found the cards and enemies to already be quite varied and fun, there was even more depth present than that. After you earn enough experience, you can level up to learn new abilities. You can collect run-altering relics, add allies who can then also level up, take on quests, and craft recipes. The minigames and dungeons are a simple and fun way to switch things up. I really enjoyed both of those, and in one run decided to gamble everything, pushing deeper into a dungeon, forcing myself into a nail-biting battle that really came down to the wire, but earned me some awesome rewards. I found the game to be very accessible, super quick and easy to learn. With all that variety and 3 different classes, Stolen Crown easily offers up dozens of hours of gameplay, and I noticed several users had put in hundreds of hours. The game has a free demo, so I highly recommend doing a few runs of that first. While it's not the most polished game out there, I think you'll quickly see $10 is a bargain for what's on offer here. Cropisle TD, previously titled Crop and Stop. This is a roguelike deck building tower defense farming game? A nice comparable touchstone would be Rogue Tower, but with several other mechanics layered on top of that basic formula. You are still drafting tiles to expand your tower defense pathway, while also drawing new towers and items to assist with your defenses. The largest change-up is the farming spin. Even if it's not the most prominent feature, you can change squares into ground for your tower or soil for your crops that support your surrounding towers. You exist as this little farmer who can hustle and scoot around the map to collect gold, treasure, and interact with other specialized discoverables. I very nearly didn't recommend this one because the tutorial is kind of atrocious. There's this text-based tutorial you can read through that gives you the basics, but it's quite clunky, and the failure to give you that information in context makes it sort of difficult to parse. I was pretty lost like 5 minutes in and gave up entirely. But after skimming the 91% positive reviews, I found users commonly recommending to push through, as you'll learn most things within a good 20 to 30 minutes. If you're not looking to figure things out as you play, you'll probably want to steer clear. I also found the UI to be a little cluttered, often unhelpful, and featuring a few missing translations, but I'm weighing those critiques against the $3 asking price. I think I even picked it up on sale for like $1. So if it at all looks interesting to you, it's probably still worth checking out. I'm also not a huge fan of how limiting the meta of the game is early on. Your first run's gonna be a little boring since you only have a few options available, but you'll at least get to preview other towers early as they'll come packaged with new pathways you draft. Maybe you decide you like the tomato cannon or the Tesla tower and you choose to unlock that one first. As you unlock and upgrade more of those, the game really starts to hit its stride. That loop of expanding your island, placing towers and crops, and fighting off enemies works really well once you get used to it. It's not an especially deep tower defense game, and it's a bare minimum farming game, but that specific combination of subgenres is bound to deeply appeal to some people, so I figured it deserves a spot on the list. Looping Bravery. This is the only other game on the list that shares that basic gameplay with Slay the Spire. It is also easily the most hidden on the list. It hasn't even crossed that 10 review threshold needed on Steam to have a proper rating, but the limited ratings it does have are 100% positive. It's pretty readily apparent that it has some audio and visual shortcomings that have likely chased people off. The only one I really took notice of was the lack of a proper soundtrack, but this is all coming from a passionate solo dev, and there is a wealth of cool new ideas on display here. Each run starts with the choice of an offensive and defensive weapon. These are similar to relics with their own passive powers, but will also determine the pool of cards you're drafting from, allowing you to set yourself up with some really interesting and creative fun new combinations right out of the gate. No two of these weapons I encountered were alike, and it was continually fun to seek out new synergies between those weapons and cards. Further distinguishing itself from Slay the Spire, you and the enemies have break bars. Filling up an enemy break bar will replenish your action points and allow you to draw another card. It's crucial to monitor this, spending cards effectively to maximize what you can do per turn. Of course, having to weigh that out against which enemy is causing you the most trouble. And all done with a mindfulness of the turn counter. You will be shown precisely when special interactions are coming up, requiring you to plan ahead and often needing to finish the battle quickly. You have one more all-important tool available to you, your antimatter. Defeat enemies to fill this resource with a variety of different ways to spend it. You can save, then load your current health value, skip enemy turns entirely, invert dangerous enemy intents, and more. It is a powerful last resort and fits well with the time-traveling theme of the game. Add in these specialized occasional enemy dialogues that both inform the backstory of the game and have rewards and sometimes penalties of their own, encouraging you to replay the game to see how that story develops. With all these new ideas coming together cohesively, I hope the depth of Looping Bravery quickly becomes apparent. There's a fair bit of jank here. I'm pretty sure I encountered a couple bugs where a card just didn't quite work how it was supposed to, but very infrequently. If that basic pixel art style doesn't bother you, for $5, this could easily become many viewers' new favorite deck building roguelike. Grid Slayer. The 15-ish minute tutorial throws a lot at you, and the art is rough at best. I also think maybe the pacing of the game was a little off. While I like the effect of these areas being constructed one square at a time, I think it could be sped up. So with a few jagged corners on it, I expect this one might turn some people away rather quickly, but after getting used to it, I thought Grid Slayer was really unique. There is a heavy emphasis on movement, positioning, and environmental interactions that felt incredibly welcome after just playing 150 hours of Baldur's Gate 3. It's not nearly as complex as that, but it scratched a similar itch. Bust open an oil barrel, push an enemy back across that slick, then light everything aflame. Oh baby, are those combos satisfying. The way projectiles are handled is really interesting. Most of them are queued up from the previous turn, which gives the enemy, and the player when used against you, an opportunity to move move out of that line of fire. Similarly, you can predict enemy movements so they walk into those projectiles. When you and enemies move around the map, you generate momentum, and there are all sorts of cards and interactions that combo with momentum to both use to your benefit or use against the enemy. I maybe wish there was a bit more going on moving your way across the map than just combats over and over. There is the option to stop at a shop at any time you wish, and your chosen tile does determine the field you'll be fighting on, but I would have loved to see events and other interesting stops along the way. But I was still drawn in by the ways your run and deck were so quickly iterated upon between those combats, which saves it from feeling too repetitive. After each combat, you level up your damage, movement, or draw count. You can then draw new cards and passive abilities, but you also draw card modifiers. These can increase the damage, knockback, range, area of effect, and more of each card. I built a deck all around ice and area of effect arrows. I could freeze enemies in position, then rain down arrows on half the grid to wipe them out. After each run, you can unlock insights, which both progress the story and grant access to new cards, enemies, weather effects, difficulty modifiers, and more. These can then be toggled on and off to suit your preferences and to allow for all sorts of experimentation. It is one of the more expensive games on the list, but it's still only $10, and I think I got it for like 75% off. If some rough hand-drawn art doesn't bother you, then you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. Cards with personalities. I've been told this plays much like a single-player Ascension, which is considered one of the first deck builders. I've never actually played that one myself, so I have to judge cards with personalities independent of that. Coming from another solo dev, this game is again 100% positive after just 13 reviews. I originally abandoned this one after failing to grasp the incredibly short tutorial. I think it partially assumed I already had played and understood Ascension. For some reason it just didn't click. But I came back to it a few days later and I came to realize how simple it really was. The game is a series of boss battles, with each victory unlocking the next in a line of 10. So while things are randomized through the shuffling of cards, I don't think you could call it a roguelike. The bottom row are your cards, the ones in your deck and the ones you're holding. The middle is a combination of monsters you must slay and cards to purchase, with either of those interactions then leading to that card being replaced. And the top row is set aside for special interactions and the boss itself. Your goal here is simply to bring the boss's health down to 0 before your own reaches 0. This game isn't run-based. Each boss battle is independent of the last, so you're always starting with a fresh pool of cards and full health. Cards you play will generate resources like gold and attack. Whatever you don't use that turn, you will lose. So as often as possible, buy new cards, spend gold in the shop, or make use of the mouth, which has a range of interactions, but raises in cost after each use. It's a really cool mechanic. Each boss has 2 timers, with simple legends explaining what those interactions will be every so many turns. The boss may simply attack you, raise its own attack, force you to discard a card, sometimes balanced against granting you resources. It's like a randomized puzzle, encouraging you to experiment with each new attempt. While the game worked fine on keyboard, it was clearly meant for controllers. As someone who primarily plays games with a mouse and keyboard, the lack of any mouse support in a card game was a little annoying. The upside is that this game is going to play really well on something like the deck. It can be beat in as little as 3 to 4 hours, but I don't think every deck builder needs to be infinitely replayable. It's a fun challenge with a lot of charm. And there is an original Pico 8 version that you can play for free to see if you generally enjoy the gameplay before jumping into the full thing. Million Monster Militia. Advertised as an unhinged roguelike deck builder, this game has a certain humor and insanity that help it stand out in the crowd. It boasts over 150 bizarre units, 50 kaiju-like bosses, with a great little loop of continually drafting new units, aiming for game-breaking synergies with insanely high damage, in very simplistic auto-battler encounters. Each turn you randomly deploy up to 25 units across a 5x5 grid. Every unit has a unique set of damage multipliers and special interactions with the units surrounding them. Whales generate water. Water can help a seed turn into a flytrap. Flytrap can eat your human units and take their power. Every new time you deploy, some weird new interaction is going to reveal itself to you. Your units apply their effects based on that positioning, deal damage, and then leave you exposed to take 1 damage. Each and every turn, you draft a new unit. And if a battle takes more than 9 rounds, you lose. Simple as that. While the bosses have fun and silly lore written up, it really does come down to how big is their health pool. There's nothing that complex you need to anticipate or work against. Just keep building up that army and try to get creative with it. With units constantly being merged, destroyed, evolving, duplicating, and whatever other insane interactions, every new unit draft has the potential to make the key difference in your build. I was on a hot streak with my Monster Hunter and Flytrap being incredibly powerful. Next thing I knew, the Flytrap ate the Hunter and the Princess destroyed the Flytrap, totally undoing all the synergies I had built up. That RNG might be a little frustrating to some players, but that was my own fault for allowing those sorts of interactions to exist within my deck. The game is already massive, with the latest update adding 21 run modifiers that can be layered together to make the game even more replayable than it already was. This early access title is delightful, one of a kind, and currently dirt cheap at just $5. And it's likely only going to get better from here. I really like in their description, all strategy and no tactics. The gameplay is very passive, but I found it incredibly fun to poke and play within that, and I imagine many of you will greatly enjoy what it has to offer. And last but not least, Ufflegrim. Ufflegrim? While this is yet another roguelike on the list, this is the only one that instead takes inspiration from traditional roguelikes, with gridded, turn-based combat. Enemies move when you move, and you must plan accordingly. The game starts out incredibly simply. You have these basic sword cards used to hack your way to the end. You'll learn the basics of each enemy, which is very important as they will become your cards. You're continually unlocking enemies to add to your limited card pool. The most interesting element is the paired options of each card. In addition to their standard attack and health, they have a skill that they will use when being summoned that informs how they'll interact with the board, allies, and enemies. And each card boasts a separate drop effect. When that card is instead placed atop another unit, this is the effect that will instead play out. There are 100 total floors to work your way through, slowly introducing over 100 new cards, giving you near endless options for setting up synergies between your summons and drop effects. While Reach the Well is the most common win condition, even that switches up to keep things fresh. I barely even scratched the surface on this one, and I was already seeing a level of complexity available in this gameplay that had me struggling just a few dozen floors down. You can also build up a base, placing portals to link to specific floors. Maybe I didn't play enough to see the point of this, since failing a level doesn't actually throw away your progress. I imagine this all matters more to the hardcore mode that is available, but maybe I just missed the point on the base building. I found the construction paper style minimal art quite charming, and the soundtrack is super enjoyable. I didn't put a lot of time into this one because I was kind of starting to struggle with it, which probably goes back to simply not having a lot of time put into traditional roguelikes myself. But from what I played, I could already see the obvious appeal here, and with only 10 current reviews on Steam, I thought more people ought to know about Ufflegrim. And there you go, 10 hidden gem deck builders. Or probably more accurately 9 hidden gems and then a Kickstarter for a game that's a little bit unknown currently. Seriously, please do check out the Novus Orbis Kickstarter, check out WizardChess in early access, I will have links to both down below. Have you played any of these games? If so, how many? Or if all of this was new to you, which do you think was the most interesting? Or which are you the most excited to go out and play for yourself? The last time I did a video kind of like this, I got so many comments from people suggesting games that have probably sold like 100,000 copies. It's not really what I'm going for with Hidden Gem. I would love to hear your recommendations for games. You don't have to limit yourself quite as heavily as 50 reviews. Even less than 1,000 is still relatively unknown, so I'd be super curious to hear what games you all might suggest. I only just found out today while putting together some final footage for this video, Steam has has deck building and deck builders as two different tags. I guess I can appreciate that one has the focus where it's entirely about the deck building and the other one has deck building as a mechanic, but based on the way tags are generally used around Steam, that's entirely redundant and not needed. But it does make me think that I probably looked over a whole bunch of games that would have been appropriate for a video like this, so I could pretty easily make a follow-up, looking for more of my own, pairing that with ones you've suggested. I hope you discovered a few new games in the process. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.